let's come back together, and I'd like to now call upon the Finance and Audit Committee Chair, Tony Gugliotta, to provide his report, and then we have some issues in relation to your report that you will then deal with.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. So the Finance and Audit Committee met on March the 19th. It was a busy agenda, and I don't have the time to go into the detail, but I'd like to sort of just highlight some issues that we talked about and items that we dealt with on the agenda. So we received 4 reports under consent agenda. Our checklist, an update on liquidity and borrowing, a litigation update, and then fourth quarter commitments in excess of $1 million. So no major issues or questions there were raised from our review, and we accepted all 4 reports under consent agenda. We also received an information report on the Expo Line escalator replacement program. As you know, the elevators and escalators on the Expo Line are nearing the end of their useful life, and so a condition assessment was done. It identified and resulted in a capital program of $48 million, which will replace 37 escalators in 14 stations over a 5-year time frame, and that project commences in May of this year. The committee also reviewed its terms of reference. This is an annual requirement under the board governance manual, and no changes are being recommended to the board at this time. The committee also reviewed and discussed a report that provided an update on our information technology program. It's a very robust program, very comprehensive, with 37 projects currently underway. We spent a bit of time talking about our IT security program and our efforts to protect TransLink from cybersecurity threats. This remains an area of focus and priority for the team, and ongoing work continues to ensure that TransLink is safeguarded. The committee also received and discussed a report on safety and emergency management. As you know, in 2017, steering committees for both emergency management and safety were established. So a number of initiatives were undertaken in 2017. And we also looked at performance trends. So positive news, lost time injury rates, for example, are flat. And customer injuries and assaults on employees are down. And we had a slight increase in terms of injury durations, but we are doing everything we can to ensure that TransLink remains a safe, secure, and resilient transit system. The committee then received an update on our internal audit activity, and the past quarter was very busy. 9 projects were completed and 13 projects remain underway, so it's a very comprehensive program. We also received 2 reports. The first was performance management of the bus company fuel process. As you know, fuel is a significant expense, over $40 million a year. So overall, I think the program is being managed efficiently, but the audit did highlight some areas for improvement which are being implemented. The second report was a strategic review of customer experience. And this report provided a number of recommendations aimed at helping TransLink improve overall customer experience and satisfaction. And there's going to be a lot of work that's going to be done this year with respect to that strategic review that the board will see later on. We then looked at Director and Employee Code of Conduct. So twice a year, the committee receives a report that reviews complaints that are made under this process. So during the last 6 months, there was 1 report of non-compliance. It was a conflict of interest issue which is currently being addressed, and the committee will be updated on how that goes at its next meeting. We then had an in-camera session with the internal audit, Derek Lee. No issues were raised during that session. However, the committee did acknowledge that Derek is taking on a new job, a promotion with the bus company, and we really thanked him for his service. He's done an excellent job in internal audit over the last 4 or 5 years. And we wish him well as he takes on his new role. We also received a report from the real estate team on activities that are being undertaken. So just let you know, the work continues in terms of with a focus on acquiring properties related to the 2 major transit project, and the team is looking at potential acquisitions over the next few months in support of those projects. The committee also reviewed and discussed the transit sustainability program. including achievements to date and sort of the plans for 2018. There's a whole host of really exciting initiatives that we discussed. I think one of them that we spent a few minutes talking about was the opportunity for TransLink to issue a green bond. And this is something actually that we're hearing from folks who want to make investments, and there may be an ability to actually issue a green bond that costs less than sort of a traditional bond. So something our finance group will explore. The committee also receives and reviews 2 reports per year, which provides information on our environmental programs and key performance indicators sort of surrounding those programs. So the report provided information on non-compliance, including reportable releases, which, good news, declined from the first half of the year, and permitted exceedances, which increased slightly compared to the first half of the year. Now, in terms of those exceedances, the rail company is looking at replacing the existing wastewater treatment system at its truck washing facility, which had a number of those exceedances, so that those should go down as a result of the investment that we're making in that area. And then lastly, we looked at our 2018 Enterprise Risk Management Program. As you know, there was a fairly thorough process within TransLink that involved management and the board identifying the top risks. So we reviewed and discussed a status update on those top risks and the treatment plans that are in place, to sort of deal with that. And so that was a good discussion that the committee had. So that's my brief update, and then I will provide sort of comments as we go through the rest of the agenda in terms of the audit committee's report in terms of those issues that the board will be dealing with. So do you want me just to continue, or?
Sure, and you have
will I
this
take
consent,
questions?
yeah, you have your consent agenda as well, okay?
Yeah, so
Okay.
if there's no questions on the meeting, I'll just move to the consent agenda item. Okay, seeing none. So on the consent agenda item, there's 4 reports. Now, 3 of the reports are related to our capital program. So both the Millennium Line extension, the Surrey Rapid Transit project, and the ongoing monitoring that we're doing on the Patella Bridge. So the committee reviewed and discussed these reports with Zani, our Vice President of Infrastructure and Engineering, and they're included in your package for information purposes. If there's any questions, obviously Zani would be happy to do that. The 4th item in the consent agenda is the 2017 statutory annual report. Now, the committee reviewed and discussed this report with management. Our legislation actually requires that we prepare this report and forward it to the Mayor's Council. As you know from looking at the report, it's very comprehensive. It includes items, for example, a summary of our operations during the year, and it compares that to our previous strategic transportation plans, previous capital and operational plans. It includes sort of our audited financial statements for 2017, results from our customer satisfaction surveys, a summary of all the board meetings and the issues that were discussed, plus a whole host of other things. So the resolution today is to approve this report and to authorize its release to the Mayor's Council.
Yeah, so thank you, Richard. And all in favor of submitting the statutory annual report? Sorry, you have a question, sir?
Well, just a bit more about a process.
Okay.
We haven't adopted the financial statements. Are they part of this report?
Yes, so the financial statements will be dealt with, I think, in a few minutes.
So we should, subject
Subject to
to,
adopting,
right,
yes.
okay, fair enough. Thank you very much. We should make sure for future that this comes in after the financial statements, yeah, okay. You are a smart guy there, Murray. All right, so subject to the financial statements, so Tony, you'll move on now and do
Sure.
that next piece?
So the
Okay.
next item is the 2017 year-end financial and performance report. Management did provide an update to the committee on this report. We had a good discussion. As you know, 2017 was a very successful year in terms of delivering investments, in terms of customer service improvements, and our financial performance. So we're going to receive a presentation from Rob on this, and he'll get into a little bit more detail. Sorry, Rob and Chris.
I think this is Rob's first open board meeting, is it not? Would you like to say a few words, Mr. CEO? The microphone
The microphone worked for Rob. Yes, we can all welcome Rob Maui. He joined us in January, latter part of January. So Rob knows everything now. He's been here for a very short, less than 2 months, I think. But Rob is our new Executive Vice President and CFO. He replaced the Kathy McClay, who was long in that job, who retired in December. Rob comes to us from the Edmonton Airport, but is maintained a home here as well, and is I think happy to be back here in the Lower Mainland, and we are very happy to have Rob here in his new position. So go ahead, Rob.
Thank you. So what I'll first do is, by way of context for the financial plan, just we went through most of these items, but in essence, the financial plan was to support our key strategies. Investment statement and state of good repair. I won't go through the details. Mobilization of Mayor's vision, which had large portion of increases in our overall capacity, as well as a number of improvements in customer experience. These changes in the operations were together with obviously supporting the operations as it existed. So it was quite a bit of an investment, as well as keeping things in good repair and setting them up for the next phase. Another area that also is highlighted in our reports is the sustainability focus. So at TransLink, we really make true to our commitment of truly integrating our sustainability commitment into our strategic planning, operations, practices, and decision making. Just as a point of reference, we've maintained the APTA Platinum level status. That's from the American Public Transportation Association, as well as reduce our carbon footprint. We have a focus on that, including a low carbon fleet strategy. And on the topic of low carbon, our fuel program, because of the provincial program, we were able to take advantage of carbon credits for previous years. That's mainly to do with natural gas, and achieved savings or a amount for those credits of $1.5 million in 2017, which is a great achievement as well. Other points that I didn't mention on here were we also were one of BC's top employers for 2016, 17, and 15 for 3 years in a row. So now moving to the financial picture. So with that, we had, as you heard earlier today, we had passenger growth of about 5.8%. That's about 3% over budget, just to set some context here. So that's, and to support that, we expect revenues to kind of align to it. So what you're seeing here is actually revenues from continuing operations was 5.9% below budget. So it doesn't necessarily follow the trend, but I'll explain why overall. So in the areas of taxation, we would have expected an increase similar to the passenger increase, except because of the price of gas and the behavior in terms of the volume of gas used in the Lower Mainland was significantly lower than what we had expected. That brought that number down to slightly negative. Otherwise, would have been on track. The other one is transit. You'll see that our transit revenues are up 5.7%. relative to 3% above budget growth in passengers, and the reason that's up higher than that is because of the mix. We had more journeys that were longer, or more three-zone passes and different product mix. It was essentially the driver of that. The other categories that were kind of major, that were negative, was government transfers. Again, these are transfers that exist as part of the programs, so it just means that we didn't complete or didn't get funding and do the work in the period of time. Then they shift. So I'll be explaining later on the capital side. We had a similar story in terms of a lot of capital not spent in 2017 that we expect to spend. All of that will be spent in 2018. So there's no issue of not doing something. It's just simply a timing issue. The other point I'll mention on here is Golden Ears Bridge. You know that went down. There's government transfers in there as well. So the combination of the two equate on the gross tolls basis to about $57 million, which is very much on track on a gross level with what we expected as the combination of the two. So now going to the expense side. The expense side, it tracks more to what you would expect, which is we're favorable to budget of 2.6%. Despite the fact that we increased all of those services and activity level quite substantially. All of our divisions came in better. Even the transit police, it looks negative, but once you adjust for, we do have miscellaneous revenue that came in as basically cost recovery. But we put it on the revenue side because of our accounting policies. So if you net that out, there was a favorable variance, actually a 0.9% favorable on a true performance basis. So including that, all the areas did perform quite well on managing expenses while pursuing our overall mission. On the capital projects, we ended up spending about $242 million investments in capital projects. Our budget was about $670 million, so we didn't spend about $430 million, which is purely related to timing and will be all spent in 2018. Where we did spend our money, you'll see the majority went to passenger vehicles that were purchased, buses, trains, etc., as well as infrastructure. As no surprise, especially given the report on all of the major upgrades and state of good repair investments made across the system as well. In terms of other wrap-up financial highlights section is we remain and actually strengthen our liquidity quite significantly this year, or last year. This was both in collaboration with our rating agencies as well as our programs, just making sure that we're in a good, healthy position there. We retained and got ratings updates from both rating agencies and got reconfirmed at the AA credit rating and stable, which is a very good achievement, as well as we issued another $200 million in bonds to the capital markets successfully as well. And as you heard a little bit earlier as well from Tony, we are investigating the green bond potential for future issues, or some future issues going forward. And that kind of wraps up the financial highlights and performance summary.
Yeah.
I'll do this part. No, Richard, go ahead. Thank you.
Well, a couple questions. I guess the first one is just in terms of general board education. We talk about green bonds. I think if we can just be a little clearer as to if we're issuing green bonds, what are the restrictions or implications around that? Because obviously it's a work that two of us here on the MFA board have done some work in taking a look at call it ethical and environmental sort of investments, etc. And I think it's incumbent that if we talk about going in that area, we have some sense as to what the financial impact, if any, is to TransLink from a financial perspective. And the second issue is just a general question, if I could. I realize that we've got AA rating right now, and I think we assume that's good. And I think from having sat through rating agency presentations many times, it all becomes relative to how other agencies, similar agencies, are rated, and everybody seems to be in the A, B, and C range. In fact, we chastised one of the presentations because it seems that the rating agencies don't know any other letters apart from A and B. So I think that saying we have a AA rating, we all nod our heads and say, gee, that's really good. But we really don't know if how that sits as a benchmark against other transit agencies, etc. So I would like, I think, to have a little bit more information about that. I think it's something the board should be reasonably comfortable with, and the green bond issue as well. Thank you.
Sure. Can I respond?
Sure, go ahead.
Through the chair, the green bond, we are in investigation mode right now, in research mode. We will be coming back before we take any action on that with the audit committee and the board as well, just to make sure that there's enough education and awareness. So we are just kind of illustrating the fact that from our early learnings,
I still, even from a board perspective, even with early learnings, I think we know you're off talking about green bonds. I still think it's incumbent upon us to have a very clear sense of what a green bond is. Sure. And why we're doing it. And I don't think I'd be surprised if we all took the test right now and got the right answer. So,
okay, duly noted. We'll make sure that update contains clear information as to what that is as well. And the second issue, Chris, I know we do have the benchmarks.
Sorry. Yeah, on the ratings, we're AA. We certainly, when you compare us to other transit agencies, we're the only transit agency that borrows money in the capital market, so we can't compare to them. But certainly we compare to other, municipalities across Canada and even provincials as well. And we're rated a lot favorable to some of the municipalities.
And that's good news. I think we should be having information in a public meeting to that,
Sure.
to that fact. I think it's good news. So I'm trying to get at, and I think therefore we should all have access to that and be prepared to ask questions.
Thank you. Murray?
Thanks, Rob. Just wanted to confirm that the Golden Ears revenue situation, in light of the tolling being removed and additional revenue being transferred by the provincial government to us, is an equivalent. When I look on, and again, this may be too detailed for this discussion, but on page 15 of the consolidated revenues picture, it shows two lines. One that says Golden Ears Bridge tolling replacement revenue at 18.6 million, and Golden Ears Bridge tolling unfavorable at 26 million. I was curious as to where the difference might be hidden in the statement.
Yes, so those are on a net basis. So on a gross basis, we did receive the right amounts. So for both from the government as well as from gross toll revenues, we just had to net the numbers as it reflects on the statements. So that's why it looks like it's less. But in actual fact, the gross numbers that we were expected to receive from the government to keep us whole was in fact honored.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? All right, so off to you, Tony.
Okay, we'll move on. Just in terms of the ratings, I can't speak to obviously transit agencies, but I know in the world of airports where I was in, Vancouver Airport has a AA, and it's only one of 3 airports in the world with a AA. So a AA rating for TransLink is very impressive in the context of non-pure government entities, and something I think we need to ensure we continue to protect. So our 2017 audited financial statements. Now the committee did review and discuss the audited financial statements with management. We also reviewed the KPMG report on the audited financial statements. We received a presentation from KPMG. And then we had an in-camera discussion with KPMG without management present to discuss the audit. No issues or concerns were raised in the in-camera session, and KPMG expressed their appreciation for the cooperation they received from TransLink employees as they undertook their audit. So most importantly, KPMG provided a written audit opinion that the consolidated financial statements present fairly in all material respects the consolidated financial position of TransLink. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the finance group, obviously, for their work in 2017 and congratulate them on receiving this clean opinion. And I think, Rob, you just want to make a few comments on, unless I've usurped your comments that you were going to make.
Pretty much. I just was going to state that we follow Canadian public sector accounting standards. Did all of no changes, material changes were made to our note disclosures or statement preparation, and as you've indicated, Tony, we've through the external auditors, we've got essentially what we phrase a clean audit, meaning that we had no material items that came up as a result of that audit. So it was included in your package, so we're welcome to take any questions.
Okay, Richard.
Ooh.
There we go. No, oh yeah, now it's working. God, sorry about that. Just the nature of the business that we're in means that we generally have a significant amount of cash and a significant amount of debt going at the same time. So I mean, the treasury functions are an organization like this are absolutely critical, because when you're sitting that amount of cash, how it's invested and the nature of the return, even on short-term funds, is really important in what we're investing at. And I would, certainly as a director, I think that having a little bit more information on those treasury functions and on how we manage our cash, I think is a critical issue, because even a few minor points on the amount of cash we're talking about sitting around can have a significant impact treasury management functions on the bottom line of TransLink. And I have no doubt we do a great job, but I still think we should hear a little bit more about that, because this is, if you look at the balance sheet, there's a huge amount of cash and debt, which is, in an organization that's growing and changing and investing and building, it's only going to get bigger. And I think that it's important that we spend a little bit more time hearing about that and understanding it. So, thank you.
Thanks, Richard. So you'll take that away, and
Yes.
then at our next meeting, we can have some further information about that. Any other questions? Karen?
Yeah, thank you, Rob and Chris. At our Finance and Audit Committee meeting, we spent a fair amount of time talking about 2017, and then a little bit of time talking about some of the upcoming accounting and reporting changes that were coming. And I just wondered if you could comment at all on the process that you'll take to, given that we're already well into 2018, the process that you will take to undertaking some of, at least looking at the impact of some of those changes, recognizing that some are not immediate, but that we know that they're likely coming.
Yes. Sure, I could start and then maybe Chris could follow up. So we work with our external auditors, first of all, to make sure that we are aware of what's coming down the pipeline with regards to proposed changes. The ones coming in right now are at least 2 or 3 years away. So we are in kind of research mode in those. Just so you know as well, the Canadian public sector accounting standards follow in sequence. So usually the IFRS standards, the International Financial Reporting Standards, will come out first. So a lot of these standards that they're referring to are in the process of being implemented this next year. So we also get learnings through that process as well to see what impact it has in the industry. So essentially we'll research that. We would typically take on a project to go further into it.
Yeah, just our usual process is we like to look at these things early, and we prepare a document outlining what our activity is on those, and it's brought to the Finance and Audit Committee annually. So we provide an annual report on what those changes are. Okay, usually it's about the September timeline, like we usually do it annually, but if there's something emerging that would come up, we would for sure get it into a committee right away, but, there's nothing really coming up, really right away, so that'll be in the September board report, or audit committee report.
Great, that's great, thank you.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Is there any other questions on this? Janet?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I think, reinforce Mayor Walton's comment about the importance of providing context. And I think probably we get very good context at the committee level on some of these items, but it's really helpful for the full board and obviously for the public as well to see, what the comparators are when we look year over year and also when we look at other organizations that are consistent. So I thought that was a really good point and something that I certainly would like to see incorporated more in the general presentations.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I think now we have a decision in relation to this.
Yes, so a resolution to approve the audited financial statements and to authorize, I think, myself and Lorraine to sign the statements.
Yes, yeah. So can I have you're making that motion,
making that
Tony?
motion,
And
yeah.
you'd like to second that motion? And all in favor for approving the financial statements? Thank you very much. All right,
Perfect.
off to you again.
Thank you very much. Just on Mayor Walton's comment, I think in the past, I think when you come back to the committee, I know that there's a cash flow report that the committee saw some time ago that looked at cash flow and pro forma looking into the future and how cash is actually being used. And I think also what's helpful is just the restricted cash and maybe explaining how certain cash is restricted to certain expenditures and how that sort of factors into the cash flow forecast. So, and then maybe that's something once the committee's looked at, we might be able to bring to the full board because it's a little bit more complicated than just looking at the cash on the balance sheet. And there's some other extenuating circumstances that impact that.
It's very complex. And
Yeah.
it's a bit of an art knowing, how much to present because you don't want to overdo it.
Mhm.
The framing is, I think, can be really helpful.
Yeah, so it's an important conversation I think the board needs to be aware of. So the next item is the transit tariff amendment. So the committee reviewed the amendment and is recommending it to the board. This is our annual increase to fares, which is consistent with the 10-year vision. And I think Rob and Chris are going to maybe speak to that and give you a little bit more information.
Sure. Okay, so basically, as you indicated, the transit tariff increases in accordance with phase 1 of the 10-year vision and investment plans. The specific proposed changes are illustrated on this slide here, which is anywhere from 10 cents to 5 cents on adult stored value in cash. And obviously concession is the 5-cent one, and adult monthly pass from $2 for for a regular pass and $1 for a concession pass. And these are the changes proposed, consistent with the plans that were stated in the vision.
Okay, so any questions in regards to the proposed fare increases? I know that the Finance and Audit Committee went through this in great detail, so can I have a motion to approve the fare increase as presented? Thank you, Anne. And seconders, and all in favor? Thank you. All right, Tony?
Okay, so I think this is the last item, which is the 2018 property tax bylaw and 2018 replacement tax bylaw. And again, the committee did have a good review and a good discussion with management with respect to this. It's a little bit complicated in terms of how the allocation of the tax is done, and I think management will probably go through that in their presentation. And at the same time, maybe you can just talk a little bit about the replacement tax, which is just a replacement for a parking sales tax, I think, and that's been set at 18 million. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that so that we can have a good understanding of what the replacement tax actually is.
Sure. So I'll start off with talking overall as context. The revenue from the property tax to fund the region is guided by legislation and the phase 1 of the investment plan. So these numbers are consistent with that. The allowable property tax per legislation and as approved by the Mayor's Council generally takes into consideration an annual increase is limited to 3% of prior year's revenue as per legislation, and an additional 1.9% increase approved under the investment plan for development. The replacement tax remains unchanged. And Chris, do you want to maybe expand a little bit more?
Thanks. The replacement tax of 18 million replaced what used to be the parking stall tax a number of years ago. So that was a tax that was brought in and did not get a lot of fanfare, and so it was replaced. It was pulled and replaced with this replacement tax. So it does not grow every year. It stays at 18 million. So we just add it to the total.
And then what we did in addition to this was just showed kind of the impact that this tax has in its key forms. So essentially the first impact is that we actually were able to reduce the residential rate class by 3.6%. So what that means is that for an average, for a homeowner who doesn't have an increase in their property value year over year, they'll actually see a decrease, a slight decrease. And if you have an increase for the average homeowner based on the most recent increases that we saw for the region, it equates to about $10 on average if you just average it out across the region per household.
All right. Yes, Richard. Well, just speak up. You can.
Thanks, sir. I think probably Derek and I could speak for about an hour about this one here because, our community, for example, our average, my house went up 30% in value, which was the mean for every house in North End District, went up 30% in value. So when our house goes up 30% in value, our mill rate comes down dramatically. So the mill rate is an absolutely meaningless statistic at all because it can be going up and down in one community and up in one and down in another. The relevant thing is ultimately the regional impact, because when you've got West Vancouver where you've got these massive spikes much greater than other areas, you see this shifting where their mill rate will potentially drop, but their amount they're paying per house goes dramatically up. And most of the public doesn't understand these numbers and relationships apart from a few accountants and elected folk. So I think we need to be much more transparent about the regional impact, because we talk about homeowners, we never even talk about businesses in here and what the business impact is. And I've been trying to get more of this information out at, certainly in my community when we start dealing with this in public informations. So I think that people, also the regional dissimilarity, so the issue with the Vancouver and the western part of Metro Vancouver picking up the burden of these increases is quite relevant, because if some area is going up in a proportion, somebody else in the Metro Vancouver area as a region. I think with Metro Vancouver and TransLink taxes, which are applied regionally, The challenge is that those disparities are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, even though they're not within our own municipal budget. So I think that, when we're, again, in terms of transparency going forward, we need to be a lot more transparent and actually highlight some of the regional differences as well, because that means nothing to my community at all, and it means nothing to the business community because there's no information up there. So I think we can do a lot more, and I think it's about us being transparent. Politically, it's not an issue for us here. I think it's an issue in terms of information that we're putting out being understood by the region and politicians at other levels of government as to what's happening with as we do our regional work here. Thanks.
Thank you, Richard. Murray.
Thank you. I'm just curious, the new growth component of this bylaw is, we've said that the new growth actually was at about 2.1% in total assessment across the region, but we're limiting our increase to 1.9% in relation to that 2.1, and I'm curious, who imposed that?
Can we take that? Yeah. It was per the legislation on that. The investment plan included 1.9%. So we didn't know what the development growth rate was going to be when we had the approved investment plan. It ended up being that the growth rate was 2.1, but because we only had 1.9 in our approved investment plan, that's all we could include as an increase.
So I guess just a corollary is that we should be careful in how we structure our investment plans to capture correctly new growth, because in some respects it limits how much we're able to collect from new growth by virtue of our investment plan. So we've capped ourselves, is what you're telling me.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, I think we should recognize that in future investment plans. Thank you.
Good point, Murray. Thank you. Any other questions in regards to this? All right, Tony, would you like to make this motion?
Yes, I'll make the motion that both bylaws as presented be approved by the board. That's the property tax and replacement tax.
All right, and a seconder for that? Jim, thank you, and all in favor? Thank you all very much. All right, so Tony, I think you're done. All right, great. All right, we're going to move to the next item on our agenda, which is the Planning and Stakeholder Relations Committee Chair Report. And I'm going to ask Larry Beasley, as the committee chair, to do this part of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We had a very long meeting, 21 items. I'm not going to go through them a lot, but for the public, there are several that are of particular interest, I think. And then we have several items, as you'll see on the consent agenda, that we have to make decisions on. New policy that is being looked at includes, and is just being started, includes a policy about washrooms in the transit system. This is going to be very important and interesting to many of our customers. It's something people have wanted us to deal with, and so now it's going to be dealt with. And also pets on our system. Again, another thing that a lot of our customers have been pushing us to be more clear on, and that inquiry is getting underway. We have now a new policy on charitable donations and on public art. And I think that's, it systematized what was kind of a random situation before. And so I think it's very important that the public knows about those. The public engagement on the new B lines, which have already been mentioned, is going to begin shortly. That's one where I think people want to get out and really express their views. And we've also starting a very forward-looking process or program to look at new mobility, new technologies over the next few years. And TransLink is going to be leading the way in a conversation in the region about that, which is very good. Another area where policy is beginning is on late-night train services, particularly in the downtown. This is something the Vancouver Council has been really pushing, and the Vancouver Mayor have really been pushing for. There are significant implications for maintenance of our system, and so that's now going to be looked at very carefully to bring back the options and what would be best to do that. And then the only other thing that I think it merits attention is that we're out there now trying to teach everyone how to use the new system that comes in, where you can tap your credit card because if you put your credit card in your wallet and you tap your whole wallet or your purse or your backpack, it's not going to work. And so we've been teaching everyone how to do that, and you might see some of that, the communications for that in the system. So I'm not going to cover many other items. Many of those were just updates, and a couple of them are still on the public agenda today as well. But there are several decisions that do have to be made. As you'll see, if I can just go ahead with the
Absolutely, thank you.
consent agenda. There are 2 independent transit service applications that are ready for approval. Essentially, these are services that are in addition to our system, and one of them is in Port Moody. It's a new service that's being piloted in the summer to really essentially take people around the Port Moody community. And the second is in White Rock, as we've already heard today from the delegation. One is a new service along the waterfront, a shuttle along the waterfront. The other is a renewal of a trolley that serves the downtown shopping area in White Rock. Both of these all 3 of these are summer efforts from roughly the end of April through to mid-September, essentially. From our point of view, what we're obliged to look at is the impact on the financial viability, I should say, of our system, and also the effectiveness of our system. And in both cases, the review concluded that there was no impact on either of those, and therefore the staff recommendation is to approve those services. In taking a broader view, obviously, every time that we see an initiative to have additional transit services added to our system, it's a good way for us to see what's happening in those areas, but it's also going to take drivers off the road and having people use alternatives. And so our committee supported those as well. The third one, it was a background report for the annual report that comes from the Access Transit Users Advisory Committee. That's an advisory committee that's been going on for some time. It just advises us on all aspects of Access Transit, and they've had a very busy year, and so we received a report on that. And so I would like to move the approval of the 2 where there are decisions and the receipt of the information one.
Thank you very much. And a seconder for that motion? Thank you, Murray. And all in favor of passing that motion? Thank you very much. So the consent agenda is complete. So now we're moving on to the phase 1 implementation. So Larry, do you have any opening comments? And I think Sarah is going to come and speak to that.
No, I think it's just, I think Sarah should give a full report on that, because it is beginning to be, there's going to be public consultation now, and this is a very important new system. This is basically the system where we build new interest, new ridership, and just enhance the service, and so it's a very important one. Sarah.
So welcome, Sarah. Thank you. No, there should be a button there that turns it on. There you go.
Okay, thank you. So as you know, TransLink will be implementing 4 new beeline routes in fall 2019 as part of the phase 1 plan. The Mayor's vision calls for 11 new beeline or better routes. Your package includes a roadmap of our plans to build on the success of the existing beelines that we have in place today and make that beeline product better, both for opening day in 2019 and over the longer term. So for 2019, we're working to add additional elements to these fast, high capacity, and very frequent routes, such as real-time bus arrival information, improved wayfinding, and at least a basic shelter at every stop, accessibility elements such as tactile pads on the sidewalks, as well as a unique brand. But our work will not stop on opening day. We will continue to work to upgrade the beeline corridors, enhancing the stops, the customer information, and very importantly, the extent of transit priority measures on the streets so that these buses get priority treatment and don't get stuck in traffic. As Larry mentioned, public consultation focused on what is planned for next year will begin on April 3rd. Implementing these beelines is very much a partnership with the municipalities, and we have been deeply engaged with municipal staff for about the past year. Through March, we've been presenting to councils in the municipalities where the new B-lines will be running. And the slides here are from the presentation that was given to the City of North Vancouver, and I just use this as an example to make you aware of what we've been out talking to councils about. So the B-lines are part of the 4 B-lines coming are part of a larger B-line network, including the 3 existing B-lines and another 6 more in the mayor's vision identified for future phases of implementation. At each council, we're focused on the specific new service coming to their community. We are talking about the congestion that transit on the corridor experiences today. This is an example of some of the analytical work that we've been doing. We're talking about the joint planning work that we've undertaken with municipalities, a real focus on the land use, the numbers of jobs and population that are within walking distance of the proposed stops, and the improved connectivity to jobs that the B-lines will provide. These B-lines will provide much faster travel times for customers because they are limited stop services. We allow all-door boarding, and ideally, they are given priority, such as bus lanes or queue jumpers at intersections. They run really frequently, at least every 10 minutes in the peak. The main marine route is proposed to run every 8 minutes. It runs early in the morning to late night every day of the week, so people don't have to check a schedule. And we're working to bring a unique look and feel to the service so that it stands out and can really become part of people's mental map of the transit network, like people have for the rail lines. We're providing specific numbers on the benefits the B-line will provide to local residents and workers, and talk about the specific stops we are proposing, as you can see on the line diagram on the bottom. Whoops. We're getting into a little more detail about how to make the B-lines faster and more reliable and reduce the amount of time our transit customers spend stuck in traffic. This is an absolutely critical element to maximizing the success of this investment, and we may be asking municipal councils to make some difficult decisions. We are hopeful that the excitement that we've heard from councils and from the public will embolden them to make these decisions. We start public consultation on April 3rd to hear from people their thoughts and questions about the service that we are proposing. The new B-lines will shift travel patterns, and we'll be talking to the public about the proposed changes to existing local services that would coincide with the opening of the B-line. The ones on the North Shore are summarized here. We're doing significant promotion of the upcoming consultation, including ads in local newspapers, all of our social media feeds, reaching out to the local community groups and community centers. We're holding in-person consultation events in every municipality that the B-lines will be running. We're even doing a big one at the Sun Run, so that'll even get more regional people from across the region at that event. And of course, feedback can be provided online through our website. We anticipate reporting back to councils in June or July on what we heard during this spring consultation, and will continue to keep municipalities through their staff and their councils informed and engaged as we continue the design and construction work for implementation in fall 2019. And that's what we've been out talking to people. We're looking forward to our consultation.
Thank you, Sarah. Larry, do you want to, is there anything else you need to do around this?
No, I'm good.
Mayor Corrigan?
Yeah, if I could just ask a couple of questions. My first question is in regard to B-lines and the efficiency of B-lines. It's absolutely critical that the measures that are necessary to be able to ensure that the B-line can move quickly through a municipality are put in place from the very beginning. And there have been, over the course of years, a great many barriers put up to B-line operation in different parts of the Lower Mainland. You know, there's always the question of street parking, for instance, you know, is the issue of queue jumpers, the issue of coordination of lights and, you know, traffic management. How do we find out about where these impasses may happen with municipalities? Because I'd like to be engaged in that part of the discussion. If municipalities are not prepared to make the necessary concessions to allow the beeline to optimize its ability to move through the city, then I don't think the city should get the beeline. You know, I think there should be a very firm position taken by the board, you know, in relation to optimizing the transit resources to ensure that we're getting that information. It isn't a different negotiation in each city. It seems to me it's got to be a one-size-fits-all if we're going to be fair.
We can, where we're at right now is, in our process, is we've been doing the analysis of where all of the major delays and the most critical choke points are. We also have work on the different types of transit interventions that are, you know, the tools in the toolkit. We are now just beginning the work of trying to match what particular intervention might be the most successful at addressing the gaps, and we can absolutely report back to the board as that design work continues and we work with the municipalities on where we see we're trying to relieve congestion. And this, you know, this will be an ongoing long-term process. We're working very hard to have some transit priority on these corridors by 2019, but we recognize that it's going to take multiple years to get them to the level that we really want them to get to.
I would add that in each of the presentations that Sarah and Jeff have made over the last, 2 weeks or so,
Yep.
to all the city councils, that's the exact message that they're sending. That has been a principal part of their presentations, is making that issue known, making those requests known. I've spoken to RAC, which is the group of the city managers, making the same request. And it's going to be a big lift. So I appreciate your point of view on that, Mayor Corrigan. It's going to be a big lift depending on what the asks are in each of the municipalities. And everyone's going to have to lean in. And time is of the essence to get these lines in place by the end of 2019. Some of these traffic priority measures, these are the types of things the cities are really going to have to move fast on. We do have funding that was approved in both Phase 1 and funding that is included in the Phase 2 plan to help support the cities going forward. But at the end of the day, they manage the right-of-way. So I think your point is absolutely spot on. So that has been very much part of the message. That's why this type of image has been repeated in each of the presentations going forward, to make it clear we need to turn that red to yellow and green for the B-lines.
I just want to be clear that it's important that we take a principled stand and that all of the cities are aware that it's got to be consistent. Oftentimes I've seen it's kind of a set of negotiations and it becomes the art of the possible, what they'll agree to and what they won't. There are cities where I sincerely believe they failed to do what they should do to optimize the B-line. I won't mention any names, but there are cities where I know they failed to do what was required to be able to optimize these. And when we're talking about transit, minutes count. You know, that's what we deal in, is minutes. You know, and the idea that we've got very valuable equipment with very expensive staff moving through our system, and we're trying to deliver to customers who want to get where they want to go. It really is critical that we are, as a board, very firm in saying if you want this kind of resource in your community, then you've got to be prepared to make some sacrifices. And sometimes that's going to require you to do things as radical as off-street parking to ensure that you're supporting your businesses in your communities. We've done that in my city and invested in it, and I think it has to be something that everybody is prepared to do. Or don't take it. You know, is leave it where it is, but don't take a resource out of us if you're not prepared to make it work and to optimize the investment. That's really my key message, and I hope that we're achieving that as we go through, and that the committee is aware of that. I know with Mr. Beasley there and his experience over the course of many years in planning is that's a valuable resource. But I want to be sure that we're this body, much more so than the Mayor's Council, has to be the one that's making those kind of demands. And you don't have the political constraints the people on the Mayor's Council do, as all you can do is put a principled stance forward as to the investment. The second question I had for you is, in regard to the B-lines, how does it work with the bus shelters? Because normally bus shelters are part of city responsibilities, either by contract or, individual cities, but how does it work with bus shelters in regard to beelines?
So during this first phase for 2019, we are continuing the provision of shelters through the municipal shelter program. And so right now, I think our assessment is that 87% of the stops already have a shelter. So there is a small number that don't have a shelter. We're going to work sort of stop by stop with the municipalities on how can a shelter be provided. Each municipality has contracts with providers, and can they, can they use that contract to get a shelter in place? We are motivated to really help municipalities if we need to get a shelter so that our customers have shelter. We know that's a really critical, important point. Over the longer term, when I talked about stop enhancements, it is our longer term vision that as we continue to upgrade these corridors, sort of a higher order custom shelter would become part of that product. But for the near term, we're looking at working with municipalities.
I think that given the nature of beelines and the requirements for different shelters than you might have in other circumstances, and you're looking at probably real-time arrival times for buses to be able to enhance the service, and I think you have to build those in to what the expectations are for the city in regard to the shelters. It can be a higher requirement on the city to be able to put in, for instance, the capacity to be able to put in those electronic facilities and whatnot. I just would like to see that built into the discussions right from the very beginning. Many of them are on contracts with companies, private sector providers. We've taken it over ourselves, which I would commend to anyone. The city of Burnaby decided that we weren't going to do that anymore. We simply contract out the advertising in shelters, but we control the shelters mainly because we had a high degree of concern about the level of maintenance that there was in the shelters in many areas, and we prefer to have our own staff maintaining the shelters because that's the expectation of our citizens. But I want to make sure that shelter program is one that's recognized as the commitment by the city to making those beelines effective.
What we're pursuing right now in terms of the real-time information is actually having that as part of the bus stop ID poll, not separate from the shelters.
Oh, okay.
Partly our strategy here is we really are kind of on an 18-month time frame approximately now, and working through all the different shelter provision is quite a lot, just given the complexities. But for the real-time information, the ID poll is something that TransLink owns that poll, and that's something we think is an easier way to get that in place.
But to your point, I mean, all of the features, the product features that you've mentioned are all on our menu. The key is what can we implement by 2019 from a practical standpoint, to the extent to which elements of that product menu remain part of our priority but can't be done within that time frame of late 2019. Our intent is to have that in place roughly by 2021.
I just want the cities to be aware of these commitments from the beginning when we're talking to them. Sometimes what happens is it's all done very quickly and the city says, this is a big surprise, I've already got the beeline, why should I have to do anything more? You should, and being a person who comes from the cities, I can tell you that is a quite accurate description, is once I've got it, why should I be sitting down and negotiating with you about it? But negotiating in the beginning and saying these are the commitments to me is very important. So I just want to be sure as we're going through that process that everyone understands what their commitment is going to be and that they've got to supply the ability to be able to make this effective, because it's so key. Cities can make transit cheaper if they work hard with TransLink to produce a good result and to do everything they can to make transit a priority. That's my view of these situations.
Thank you. So I have Richard, Murray, and then Larry. And then Karen. Okay, Richard? You're good? Oh, you did. Okay, sorry. So Murray?
Yeah, just in follow-up to Mayor Corrigan's comments, it seems to me we were talking about having project agreements for the rail projects. It seems to me that in order to bring clarity and commitment to the beelines, it may be appropriate for us to develop maybe a pro forma agreement for beeline implementation that would require similar approvals by both parties to the commitments that are in that agreement. So there isn't any question about what's expected of each party, at least at the outset. And there may be augmentations required after the project is implemented as we gain experience. But at least it's a way to achieve a commitment on both sides.
Thank you. And then I have Larry.
Yeah, just going back to the previous point, having been in a city hall for about 40 years, I know that you can get a take fairly early before you go through all the detailed negotiations as to whether or not you have a willing collaborator with you. And I think it would be useful if, in addition to going out and speaking to the public, if you can make that assessment and you believe there's going to be a difficulty in the negotiation, I think that should come back to the board early, because I think there are many things that we can do to help facilitate whatever is unfolding in a more positive way, because it is so much in the hands of the municipality. And fairly quickly if this is going to be a real collaborative thing, we're trying to all do our best, or not one where people are not really caring that much.
The one thing I should add, just this visual, how many different jurisdictions plus First Nations do we have to work with?
11 municipalities plus First Nations.
So
plus 14.
part of the challenge into your project
And the
agreement
ministry.
issue.
And the ministry.
And the ministry, of course. So Lougheed Highway on. In fact, Jeff Cross and I met with Minister Trevena yesterday and had that very discussion about Lougheed for that beeline. But that makes this complicated, very, very difficult, as they're going through multiple jurisdictions. So the Vancouver beeline is ostensibly the easiest. It's one city. Mm-hmm. The Fraser Highway beeline is ostensibly going to be relatively straightforward. It's almost all Surrey and then a city of Langley. But when you see North Vancouver and then the Lougheed Highway beeline, it's much more complicated because the multiple jurisdictions. I appreciate the support, that you've indicated from the board. I think this is worthy to bring back to the Mayor's Council, along this conversation as well, and make sure all the mayors hear that as well. And I think the support here we're getting to let's get it done, let's try to get those types of speed and reliability features and traffic system management features in place is welcome to hear from the board.
Great, thank you. Karen?
Yeah, so I concur on the previous discussion. I just wanted to ask a question about all-door boarding, because it was brought up earlier in this meeting, and I also wondered about it. If we're talking about potentially full buses, moving faster, dedicated service, and we have people who are slow, maybe they're not completely mobility challenged, but for whatever reason they're slow, and then if we combine them with potentially people who may not have paid, we start to have crowding, and so maybe safety issues and also revenue issues. I think TransLink's done a really good job of moving towards making sure that people are paying for their fares. It would be a shame to have the buses crowded with people who aren't paying, particularly if we've also introduced a fare increase. So just some thoughts on that.
Certainly the safety of our customers is our number one priority, and that's always what we would make sure, and our operators are trained to that. We are currently we have some use of all-door boarding today, and we're currently doing a pilot where we've increased the all-door boarding on the existing beelines, and we have several phases of study, including assessing what the fare revenue impact will be. It's been in place since the beginning of January. Our early indications are that it's achieving benefits in terms of saved travel time, which translate directly into saving operational dollars, as well as making the service better for our customers because they're getting from point A to point B faster. And then we are also looking at the fare revenue implications, and that will be part of the decision. So the all-door boarding is a bit of an asterisk because it is pending the outcome of this current review that we're doing.
That sounds good, thank you.
Thank you, and Sarah? Oh, you're good? Okay. All right. Well, Sarah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to invite Steve up to give us a little entertaining presentation about card clashing, or tap to pay as I think you put it on our agenda. When I first heard the word card clashing, I didn't really know what it meant, but I learned quickly. Come on, this is the lighthearted part of the agenda.
Well, hi everyone. So I'm here today to talk to you about some of the new payment options we have for our customers. It is a program we're calling Tap to Pay. And what this is really about is providing our customers with some more convenient payment options whenever they're using our transit system. So Compass Card System, just for some background, the Compass Card System was launched in 2016 and it has been a real success story for us as an organization. We've seen a 97% adoption rate of the Compass system, so only 3% of all transactions in our system are using cash. There are 1.7 million taps on fare aids every day. We have 1.2 million Compass cards in active circulation right now. And in fact, last summer we recorded our 1 billionth tap on the system. So the feedback from our customers has been very positive. They appreciate the convenience of Compass. It's a peace of mind with the balance protection, auto load features, the ability to manage the account online, and just generally the reliability of the system has been excellent. With that in mind, though, we wanted to take a look at some ways we can make the system even better for our customers. Right now, there are 3 payment options: your Compass card, you can buy a cash ticket, or you can buy a one-off Compass ticket or cash card. So that's why we're introducing our new Tap to Pay options. And what this is with our new Tap to Pay options is that you'll be able to pay and use your Visa, your MasterCard, or your mobile wallet. So that's Google Pay, Apple Pay, Samsung Pay. And you can use any of those items to pay cash fare to ride in our bus, our SkyTrain, and our CST. So what it means for our customers is that if you choose to use a credit card or a mobile wallet, you don't need to pre-purchase a fare. You can skip those lineups at the Compass vending machine. You can avoid having to figure out what zone you're in or how many zones you need, time of day, day of week, and you've got really seamless transfers across all modes. So it's a real benefit to many of our customers. Now that being said, the main beneficiaries of these options are going to be Visitor Store City. They're going to be occasional riders on our system, and then people who currently use their credit card at the vending machine. So just think about right now that person coming downtown for a concert, a sporting event, or a night out, big crowds, long lineups at the Compass vending machines. Right now, we put up sandwich boards, encouraging people to buy your return ticket in advance, do it now before you have to come all the way back. With Tap to Pay, Tap to Ride, it's a very seamless experience. You're going to have easy transaction, no lineups. You literally just tap and ride on our system. And the other benefit, I think, is going to be that once we get more of these occasional riders to use the system in such a seamless way, we're really tearing down a barrier here. They're going to see how convenient it is, how useful it is, and we're going to see more and more people actually using it for those one-off trips downtown or around our system, to concerts, to a sporting event, or a night. And that's a really good thing for all of our system. Now that said, a Compass card is still the best option for our regular users. The Compass card gives us the ability to offer discounts, short value, monthly passes, student passes, and so on. So I just want to make that point as well. So I want to make the board aware that we are focused right now on one consumer behavior that we really want to discourage, and that's the habit of tapping your wallet or your phone that has multiple cards on it. It's something we call card clash. So if you tap your wallet with multiple cards, you could end up with a tap error, or the system could charge a card that our customer didn't intend to use. And we want to avoid that. That's something we don't want our customers to experience. I mean, just think about going to the grocery store, checkout lineup, or paying for a restaurant bill, and you just tap your wallet. You don't want to do that, right? You want to pick out the card that you want. And that's the behavior we want to encourage our customers to use. So we've launched a consumer education campaign called Tap Your Card, Not Your Wallet, and we're using it throughout our system. we've looked at other jurisdictions who have brought in systems that involve tapping, and we've learned from these other jurisdictions that consumer education in advance is very important. And that's why we really are trying to get this message out to everybody as much as possible. Now, beginning earlier this month, we started sharing the message across all of our media channels, social media channels, advertising in our system. We're out there tweeting about it. We're on Facebook, YouTube, all of our various channels. And here's an example of the thanks to our social media team for putting that together. But we are trying, that's an example of how we're trying to get it out on all the channels and trying to get our audience informed about all of this. We have information on SkyTrain platforms, on bus readers, on fare gates, on buses and SkyTrain cars themselves. We are also making the information available in Cantonese and Punjabi. And we will have street teams available as we get closer to the launch date. We will have street teams available at SkyTrain stations, by fare gates, creating more awareness. And in fact, we're going to be handing out these lanyards that enable you to put your Compass card in the sleeve standalone and just use that. Take it out of your wallet, take it off your phone, put it in this. We have them at the back of the room here, so for anyone in the room who wants one of these, come on up and get them. They're totally free. They're on. So we're going to continue our campaign. So what's coming next is that later this spring we're actually going to open up the system and enable people to use the system, tap-to-pay system. And that'll be coming later this spring. In the meantime, we are going to continue this consumer education campaign. It's very important to us that we minimize the chances of people accidentally tapping the wrong card. We also are going to partner with YVR, cruise ship terminals, and really reach out to visitors and make sure that they begin to understand what an easy option this is to use our system. I mean, think about all the people that use Canada Line coming from the airport. This will just make it a really simpler and easier experience for them. And of course, we're also going to target those occasional riders through all of our channels. We really want to encourage people to try out our system. We think we have a great system. We think it makes it so easy to go out and spend a night out, go to a concert, go to a sporting event, just save yourself all the hassle of driving around in those circumstances. And this makes it just so easy to do that. So without having to take any comments.
Great. Any questions for Steve in regards or any comments? Yes, Richard.
It's just a quick one, Steve. The people using their Visa cards, for example, are they required to have a chip in it, or how do they are?
It's contactless.
Yeah. So the people that can use it are the ones who are comfortable using, basically using the tap the same way they would at the supermarket counter.
Right.
But for people who don't want that, you know, that I still don't like, and many people don't like to use the tap at the London Drugs. You're still in the same situation. You'll have to go to you can go to the machine, and which in the machine you do put in your PIN number.
Yeah.
So I think it's a distinction we need to make sure is clear, is that people who want to use their PIN number for their own protection will not have the access to using the tap, but they still have the option of using the Compass. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And Karen.
I don't know if this is a question for you or not. It might be an IT question. But I heard that there are scanners now in parts of the world that can read RFIDs like 7 blocks away. Do we need to be thinking about that right now, or does that lanyard provide protection against? The protective devices are like little plastic things, so they're pretty simple. I just wondered if that's something we need to think about.
One thing I should note that in order to, this doesn't quite answer your question here, but in order to read to tap, you have to be pretty close to the machine itself,
Yeah.
right? So that's why we're encouraging people to take up the card you want and just tap it really close. The field that it reads is not very high, it doesn't have a big range. So that it really requires you to have an element of protection as you're using it.
Yeah.
The card is designed, I think it's like a couple of inches at most in the way that our card is designed, so
Yeah.
you can't have that further field read on our RFID chip.
Right. That answers the question. Thank you. Thanks.
All right, and Jim.
A credit card user, I guess they're out of luck if they qualify for concession fare.
They should continue to use their Compass cards.
but I think a senior tourist would be paying the regular fare.
If you're paying full cash, right?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, any other questions? Well, I think this is a wonderful next step for our system, and I know that the better our education program is, the less errors we will have to fix after the fact, so carry on. Yeah, thank you. Larry, is there anything else that you have in relation to your report?
No.
Okay,
Thank
well,
you.
hearing none then, we'll move on to Janet, who's going to give us our HR and Governance Committee report.
All right, and bringing up the rear here, I will be brief. I can report that the committee met on March 20th. We were all in attendance, including our board chair, Lorraine Cunningham. I'll give you a few highlights. We received the semi-annual privacy management report from our privacy officer, Jennifer Johnson. That's a report that provides an overview of all of TransLink's really broad-based privacy management program elements, and the goal, of course, is to ensure compliance with current best practice and all legal requirements. So there are 4 major areas of focus for this report. So I'm pleased to confirm that we have ongoing reviews of all public-facing policies underway, and also privacy impact assessments are conducted for all new projects and any major program changes that have or do involve personal information. So that's going well. As a matter of oversight, we receive a report on any Freedom of Information requests, reviews by the Office of Information and Privacy, and also any breaches. And I can confirm that we have had only very minor breaches, all low risk, all contained, and all followed up appropriately. We also had a brief discussion about the screening panel process for 2018. There are 3 board members whose terms will expire December 31st, and the panel's role is to identify suitable candidates. The panel will be constituted by June 30th, work done over the summer months with recommendations to the Mayor's Council by September the 15th. And we also received the quarterly report from our Vice President of Human Resources. This is, of course, critical to ensuring that we have a positive human resources environment. So I would be remiss if I didn't draw attention to our 2017 Top Employer for BC Award. So again, I think that's the 3rd year in a row that we've received that, so well done to the team. We also heard from about our employee engagement committees that are working to build the level of employee engagement within the organization, corporate wellness initiatives, and also our transit operator recruitment process, which of course has some pretty aggressive targets there. 2 other things. Finally, we had a good discussion, and I want to acknowledge Mayor Corrigan for raising this. We are very conscious of the turnover that we'll likely see in the Mayor's Council this coming fall, and the importance of really ensuring that we provide a robust and a comprehensive orientation process for incoming members of the Mayor's Council. So we had a good discussion about that. And then we are continuing to work on our respectful workplace policy, and to make sure that it's consistent with current best practice, and that will come forward in the next board cycle. So that concludes my report, unless people have questions.
Are there any questions for Janet in regards to her report? All right, well, I know the committee was very engaged in the conversation while the meeting was going on, so you've answered everybody else's questions.
Okay.
All right, well, on that note, I think that draws our meeting to a close. I want to say goodbye and thank you very much to all of our online viewers, as well as those here in the audience. And to give a special shout out to Minister Selena Robinson, who sent me a message halfway through the meeting to tell us that she was participating and watching our meeting, and it just shows the dedication and commitment that the minister has to TransLink to be sitting and observing our meeting during the day. So so on that, I will call for a motion to adjourn the meeting. Thank you. All in favor? Thank you very much. And goodbye to everybody out there. Thank you.